tell you my problems, meditating my silence. But I keep pushing my pen, rotating my stylus. Brokenness feeling like sin, now no breath, low dollar. Used to be left on red, now all the girls go holler. Now all the girls go follow, all the fake fans gon' pile up. I need peace to borrow, get that shit right back tomorrow. Somehow all the fans go bravo, smile so much to hide my sorrows. Faith is shaky in vibrato. I can't hold a frown too long, I can't stay down too long.
And we are live. Welcome everyone back to another episode of the Coach Mo Murphy Show with our weekly co-host, Jeff Hunt, in the building to break down another absolutely amazing college football weekend. And I think this is going to be a norm as far as just some of the results that happened in the college football world. But there's basically been breaking news, Jeff. You know, I hit you earlier to talk about doing this show, and I just thought we were going to talk about the results, talk a little Ohio State, Illinois, talk about the team up north taking a loss. How, is Indiana for real? They're probably going to be a top 5 team in the country. Texas A&M won. All of that happened. Florida lost. Texas beat Oklahoma. Like, that's just a rundown of the crazy Saturday. That Georgia-Auburn game, for anybody that actually watched that game, was probably one of the wildest games of the weekend when you talk about a lot of things that played a factor in the result of that game of Georgia being able to win. But all of that happened, Jeff, and that was not the breaking news. That was not, the thing that is to cover on this glorious Sunday after a victory Sunday from Ohio State beating Illinois. The breaking news to cover, Jeff, was the fact that James Franklin is out as head coach at Penn State. Now, Jeff, they took a third loss in a row, yesterday to Northwestern. They lost Drew LR out for the season. So you kind of figured this would be some conversation. How much longer does James Franklin have? Remember, we were having this conversation prior to the Oregon game. We had this conversation after the Oregon game. Definitely had this conversation last week after the loss to UCLA. And I don't know, they ignited something in UCLA because they looked really good on the offensive side of the ball again yesterday. Shout out to UCLA. But, this was a conversation. Didn't even entertain Penn State losing to Northwestern. Didn't have a thought about it. Didn't really care about the game because I just didn't think that, a groundbreaking move would come from the result of that game, and it did. Penn State loses to Northwestern. They're now 3-3 on the season. A team with national title hopes has now fired their head coach. Jeff, what was your initial reaction? Like, we're Ohio State fans. Everybody knows, anybody who's watching or anybody who sees a clip clearly sees you have all your Ohio State gear on. Everybody who knows me, knows this show, knows it's all about Ohio State over this way. So this being within the conference and being a conference rival, having some groundbreaking news like this and it being a Penn State and not a Maryland or not a Wisconsin or not one of the bottom tier teams that aren't necessarily in our way, but like the Penn State, James Franklin, 12 years, like, everything. What was your initial reaction, Jeff?
I was stunned. And honestly, and I want to say I was stunned by Penn State made the right decision. And I say that I wasn't, again, I don't watch these things hoping that a guy gets fired, hoping that a team's bad, hoping all these things. Not like I ever root for Penn State, but I don't, we're fortunate as Buckeye fans. We don't have to hate watch. We don't have to hope for, other teams to come down to our level, so to speak. So we are able to, if our team always controls its own fate, but so did Penn State this year. What amazed me is that a team had the guts to do the right thing. They were gonna have to spend the buyout no matter what. I believe it's somewhere near $50 million to buy out Franklin because Penn State, had locked him in. But this is what you have to do, because now if you truly want to get the right coach, I shouldn't say the right coach, you truly want to get a true culture changing coach the next time, you cannot wait till after bowl season and let this ride out and let all these coordinators go to other teams, let all the NFL guys who may want to step back into college go to other teams. Like, that's the worst mistake a team can make, is wait till that, because now you might have lost all those guys, because college coaches will move on. We've seen it several times. Like, a coach moves on before his team even plays a bowl game. And so if you wait till the bowl game, you might miss on 2, 3, 4, 5 of the best hires in the country. So I kind of was shocked that Penn State was like, that's it. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't think he was on that short of a leash. I assumed that they were like, it doesn't matter. This is as good as it's going to get. So, what I don't know about Penn State, and I don't think any of us know yet, I don't think we know where their program is in the modern era. I have no idea what kind of money they have. I have no idea what kind of NIL money they have. I have no idea what kind of equity, outside they have to buy players, all these things. I don't know that about Penn State. I know the brand, but I mean, the brand, like brands changed. Once we went to NIL, once we went to transfer portal, brands changed. I don't know if Penn State's going to be left in the past. I have no idea. You know what I mean? I don't know enough about the inside, but I do respect that they're like, here's another thing. Penn State didn't just lose another game. Penn State, a team coming into the season, was a locked, no doubt, one or two team in the country across the board. Even Mo and Jeff would have agreed that Penn State had the right to be one or two in the country, no matter how good we thought they were. They have not beat a Power 4 team yet, Mo. Like, this is a team. This is not just a struggling team. This is not a disappointing team. This is technically one of the worst teams in the country as we sit here and speak. And it, like, you can't let this go on. We're probably going to have the Drew Aller conversation and all these things. But so my shock, the question you asked, my shock was that they had the guts to do it. And now they've given themselves a chance to pick from the best coach. Like right now, their transfer portal started today. Like right now, Penn State, they're on to next season. And that's what you have to do. So whoever made that decision, I respect, because the worst thing they could have done is ride this thing out.
Yeah, and the one thing that you touched on, which was something I was going to say, was, are we so sure that, like, how good of a job is Penn State? Like, they talk about, I guess the dream hire would be Tom Signetti from Indiana. But the conversation would be like, is that a lateral move for him? Like right now, he has all the resources. He's got a roster. They've been putting their more money into athletics. Like, obviously, he's been winning. He's only in his second year. And like, essentially for an Indiana program, all he has done is win. Like, what he has done so far in the first 2 years is not just meet expectations to be the head coach of Indiana, but supersede expectations to the point like you're on your way to get a statue. If you keep this up for another 5 to 10 years, like, you'll be a statue of a coach in front of, Indiana Stadium. But like, how good of a job is Penn State? Like, why would I leave Indiana to go to Penn State? Or, all these other, people are saying Matt Rule in Nebraska, and maybe that makes sense. He's a Penn State grad. Like, obviously the Matt Rule attachment to Penn State makes Matt Rule the most sense. And then when you look at why in his situation, is Penn State a better job than Nebraska? I think possibly. Nebraska's willing to pour a lot of money into it, but I just think when you start to jump into the new NIL era, traditionally teams are going to start to fall off that carry on tradition. And I just think Penn State is tradition and brand is stronger and bigger to the newer generation than Nebraska is. So if you're going to hold on to that, I think it'd be a slight upgrade. I think Penn State, its name holds more weight than Nebraska right now. But even if you talk about a Lane Kiffin, like, if I'm gonna leave the SEC at Ole Miss, where like they love me right now, why would I go to Penn State in the Big Ten, where realistically coming in, you're at the very best. You're coming into the third best team in the conference, because now that you fired James Franklin, you see what Penn State is like. Ohio State and Oregon are clearly 1 and 2. Don't let this be the fact of like Lincoln Riley has figured it out. Now you're talking about USC is 3, Michigan still could be 4 over Penn State. Like, there's a factor where this could be the 4th or 5th best team.
Yes.
Like, expectation coming in and year out while taking the job. And maybe it's a lateral move for a lot of coaches. And I don't know what type of money Penn State has. I don't know, what type of dollars they spend on the NIL. Those are all questions that could be answered by somebody who has more, expertise inside that and what Penn State's willing to do with their program than myself. But I'm not sure Penn State is just the world's greatest job. And I'm sure Penn State fans would have a hard time like facing that fact. But I mean, you're in the Midwest. You're not the premier brand like Ohio State. You're in the Big Ten, where you got teams like Oregon that came in. You got that 2 teams in Southern California, and UCLA is open. Like, the UCLA job is open. in its own conference. Like, is UCLA a possible better job to come into the Big Ten with than Penn State? Like, that's another conversation. What job would you rather come into the Big Ten with, being the UCLA head coach or being the Penn State head coach? And like, what type of resources do I have? Like, so all those conversations are for Penn State. And so that's why, as much as we talk about like, oh, they need to go get whoever, it's like, but does that whoever, does that somebody, that big name, that splash hire, are they even interested, especially those with a job? Like, am I making a lateral move? Does it make sense to make a lateral move to Penn State?
Yeah, the only thing would be you can lure a guy with. I do think that Penn State, because of the size of the university and the tradition, and on this hire particular, you're going to be able to just spend a ton of money. So like a coach can be like, no matter what, this is worth taking the job. Same when Franklin went there from Vanderbilt, it was a good hire, but it was a no brainer because like he's getting this guy is going to make 40 some $million from getting fired. But like what has changed about Penn State, for this would be Jeff's grandpa corner here. So what people don't realize is Penn State, everything Penn State was built on was built as an independent. Penn State has not done much as a Big Ten team. And I believe that was 1995 when they moved to the Big Ten, which was one of the biggest moves in college football history at the point. They have not won a national championship as a Big Ten team. They have not won much as a Big Ten team. They've had a couple, probably 10 great seasons that if you care about bowl games and stuff, might have amounted to something, but they haven't done much. They've been pretty productive as far as the NFL was. They never, since 1995, when they came in and went undefeated and went to the Rose Bowl, or 94, I'm sorry, I think it was 94. I apologize. But regardless, they haven't won a championship since I believe 84, maybe 83, one of those two. Like, I don't remember Penn State win the national championship, and I'm 50. So, like, I think a lot of people, like, they look at the brand and they're like, wow, like, how, just like you talked about. But someone Mo Murphy's age is like, Penn State has not been a factor in my lifetime. They've been a nuisance. They upset Ohio State every now and then. They have a great season. They won a couple, maybe one or two Big Ten championships. I don't remember, but none of it's really mattered. And so, therefore, just like you said, like, it's the same thing. And I compared it to Florida State earlier. I'm like, look what, like, Florida State fell off a cliff, a couple times. Like, a great program can just fall off a cliff in today's football. And I think that Penn State is in danger of that big time. And to your point, I think if they I think in the Big Ten right now, I think Ohio State, Oregon, and Michigan are solidly better programs, better funded, and in a consistently better position than Penn State. So like you say, Penn State at their very, very best can be the fourth best team in the conference, which that's fine. That'll get you to the playoffs.
Right.
But just all these things, I know we're kind of, going in circles here, but like, just to put it in perspective, it's called the Big Ten, and Penn State's ranked 15th in the Big Ten right now after 6 weeks of football, and they do not have a Power 4 win. Like, it cannot be stressed enough what an absolute disaster this season is. And I know everybody's looking at Jeff right now and saying, well, if they beat Ohio State, you know what? If Penn State wants to have a complete failure of a season and it's all pinned on beating Ohio State, just like Michigan did last year, then that's a sad place to be in. And that's my exact point of, like, all you have left to hang on is hope to upset Ohio State, a team that you were ranked ahead of coming into the season. Then that's where you're at as a program. So yeah, it's nothing less than a disaster. I don't know what they're going to do next. I don't know who the guy is. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if we want to have the Drew Aller conversation of like you hung on to this dude for 3 years and he wasn't it. Like you could have moved on. They could have searched, they could have tried to pull, Air Nolan out of Ohio State a year ago. They could have tried to, there's a lot of guys that I think they could have snagged into this offense and had a better team. And they're like, no, we're riding with this guy. Whoever makes those decisions, like, that's a decision to make, not to pounce on the guy. He's got an injury and he's out for the season or whatever, but he wasn't it. And that's the whole point. And Franklin tied his career to that guy. And here's where he's at.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say about Penn State, because, like I said, this breaking news kind of took the direction of the show.
It was worth talking about.
Yeah, 100%. But like, the last thing I'll say about Penn State is this, Jeff, is you're older than me and you painted the picture. And so for me, it validated everything that I'm about to say, in my opinion, coming off of what you've said, because you've seen it. But to me, Penn State's brand and relevance has hung on being the biggest threat to Ohio State, not named Michigan, in the Big Ten
Yes.
since they've been there. Like, essentially, and now look, now Penn State looks like they're so much farther from Ohio State. James Franklin is fired. Like, now we're not remotely close to what's kept us relevant, which is always being, if it's not Michigan, it's been us as the biggest threat to
Yes.
Ohio State. So, like you said, like, could they upset Ohio State? Sure. James Franklin beat Ohio State like one time. Like, the whole, like, oh, they are a threat and it is a close game. But at some point, like, Ohio State constantly wins them. So it's like they've tried to paint this big rivalry. They've done the whiteout. They've done it during the day. They've done it during the night when playing Ohio State at third place. And it's this big thing. And the TV, all the TV, the media, they love it. If it's on ABC or ESPN or Fox, no matter what it is, they love to have it on their TV. And college football fans enjoy that type of environment. But realistically, they haven't been that big of a threat. And then just last year, you look at it like you were a play or two away from going to the national championship and playing the Ohio State Buckeyes. And really, you messed yourself up of really James Franklin having the ultimate shot of winning the game of all games, one, to win the national championship, but beating Ohio State finally again in the national championship. Like, that shuts all the noise down. That keeps your job for forever at Penn State. And instead, like, you seem so far from them that your season is going to ride on. Hopefully we're able to, but now you're going into Columbus. And so that's my other thing, is that the people that hope you're going to beat Ohio State, like, this game is not a game where you can do a big whiteout and your backup quarterback and y'all can rally behind the team. Like, you're going into Columbus this year against a team that's on a whole nother mission. And so the likeliness of this team being on upset alert, honestly, with Penn State, and you living on this will be the greatest accomplishment of your season, is beating one of Indiana or Ohio State, which is left on your schedule, that are ranked teams for. But I don't see that. And especially now, like, I think the Ohio States and the Indianas will be well prepared for the fact of a Penn State looking for, just a puncher's chance of like some type of light to shine on this season, because they're on track, Jeff, to finish the season with not having a Power Four win. Because I mean, with the direction they're going, having fired their head coach, having lost their starting quarterback, like, you're expecting this team to rally. Who knows if either one of their NFL bound running backs decide to sit out the rest of the season? Like, you have to think about players who are NFL bound as well. Like, do I even play the rest of the season because I could end up getting injured?
Yes.
Then you talk about guys who will redshirt, that haven't played enough games up to this point, that'll redshirt and end up transferring. You just saw how many guys who were committed to Penn State immediately, 5 and 4 stars, immediately amongst hearing the James Franklin news, decommits from Penn State. So, like, this is obviously a brand new rebuilding program. And obviously, depending on the hire, will depend on what starts to come in, who decides to stay, who decides to still leave. But you're that 6 weeks, like 6 games into the season, Jeff. We ain't even talking about week 10, week 11. We're talking about halfway through the season. You're already, like you said, you've already moved on to the next season.
Yeah. Again, they're at a complete restart. I know we can't talk about Penn State all day, but like, this is a big deal. Like, major teams don't fire. Even like Florida, we were like, oh, Napier's gone. No, he beats Texas. You know what I mean? Like, Texas, oh, they're dead in the water. No, Texas is alive again. They beat Oklahoma and Red River. You know what I mean? Like, this is what teams do to rally. The last thing I'll say is Penn State couldn't muster up beating Northwestern at home. No offense to Northwestern, they played the game, but you shouldn't be as good as Penn State. So for the record, I just want to state, this is why when they think Jeff is crazy of how critical he watches Ohio State, this is the cliff that I don't want to fall off. This is the reason that Ryan Day is not satisfied after a victory. This is the reason that the fan base is not satisfied if we don't make the playoffs, and so on and so forth, because this is what you wind up with when you're like, let's run it back. You know what I mean? Like, 2 years ago, Ryan Day had the choice, like, what do we do next? And he's like, Kyle McCord, hit the bricks. This ain't going. This is not going to work. Losing one game is not good enough. And I'm just, it is what it is. James Franklin, I honestly think he's a quality football coach, but I think he makes. I think first of all, the mistake that he made, and I said it all year, and I said it last year, was that he was too comfortable with backing into the playoffs. He said it time and time again about it's a long season, it's not the end of the world when you don't think it's the end of the world when you lose a game, you can only do that once. And then now it is the end of the world. So I think that was a mistake. I think the approach was a mistake. I think the mentality that he put into his team was a mistake, and I think it caught up with him. This is a quality team. I think that if you take the players off this team and restart today, I think that I think that they can win a lot of games. It was mentality, it was approach, it was game plan, several things. They wasted a lot of talent at Penn State, is what I would say, and I would think the players would agree with that. And it is going to be interesting to see. This is the first case study that we've seen. NFL does this all the time, and you already brought it up. How are they going to handle the rest of the season? Because it can go one of two ways, and it's going to be fascinating to see what happens. I know we got to get on now.
Yeah, I mean, hey, we spent 20 minutes on a team that has now fallen into irrelevancy in the Big Ten. And now we're going to move on to some of the matchups and the teams that actually matter. Like the first team that matters, the team of all teams, the Ohio State Buckeyes open up the game. They opened up the slate of Saturday, playing number 17 Illinois on the road, and they did nothing but dominate defensively. Offensively, here's my thing. Here's my takeaway from this, Jeff, is this Ohio State team is damn good. And I say that while being critical of the way they played on Saturday. I don't think they played the greatest against Illinois, but you still manhandled Illinois. There still wasn't a point in time through 4 quarters that you thought Illinois was going to beat Ohio State, and the end result showed that. And you still, when the offense can't get going, just give it to Jeremiah Smith, just find Carnell Tate.
Yeah.
Like, that still holds true against a quality team of Illinois. Like, I know they got smacked by Indiana. They got blasted, and that's what people are comparing the game to. Well, look what Indiana did as opposed to what Ohio State did. And Indiana deserves all the credit. We'll talk about them and their game because they deserve all the credit. They deserve all the love that their the irrational love that the fans are going to give them, the irrational love that the media is going to give them to build up a team like Indiana. They deserve stuff like this because teams like Ohio State, where we're going to be at, still being ranked number 1 in the AP poll, everybody questioning our resume. This is a year in, year out thing for Ohio State Buckeye fans. So this is not something where we have to spend our time arguing about who we are versus who the next team is, this, that, and the other. Everything will fall into its place when it needs to fall into its place. We just have to continue marching. And I say that, and we didn't play the greatest against Illinois, but the guys that you wanted to see play great did. Like Arvell Reese continues to make his case for being the best linebacker in the country. Caleb Downs had 9 tackles. He made 1 mistake, and it was a mistake Caleb Downs will probably never make again. It was like a glaring moment in the game where wow, Caleb Downs didn't make that play. Still finished with 9 tackles, 2 pass blocks, just was everywhere on the field. He changes the dynamic of how a team has to run the offense just by being on the field. You have to account for Caleb Downs. The person I was disappointed with was David, Igbinosun. I text you and Jay during the game. And the reason why I was disappointed is because, I know he had 4 pass blocks, and that's what he held on to. They told him after the game, and he was kind of oh, really? Well, don't throw my way. And I'm like, he really was a walking pass interference. He really was a walking penalty on defense. And for the past 2 years, since he's been at Ohio State and been a starting corner, he's been one of, if not the most penalized cornerbacks in the country. Not just on the team, but in the country. And so it seemed like every time Illinois threw his way, you were just waiting for the flag to be thrown. And so that was a disappointing part on defense. I feel like they tried to pick on him a little bit and get the ref to pull that flag out of their pocket. And they did a couple of times. And I think there were a couple more that they could have pulled. There were a couple more times where they could have pulled the flag out. Both sides, the Jeremiah Smith, the questionable, whether it was a catch, whether he finished the process or not, I get that. I get that whole thing, but that was a pass interference as well. And if you really wanted to get technical, they could have been a targeting. Guy hit him with the crown of his helmet, but that's getting particular because I think they let Ohio State get away with a lot, specifically Igbinosun, when he was guarding the wide receivers. I think they let him get a lot with holding, a lot of pass interference. And to me, he was just one of the more disappointing guys when you have a true freshman, Devin Sanchez, stand, on the other side, and he looked really well to me, even though we had a late scratch at corner, and that's why Devin Sanchez was on the field. But I almost looked like, man, Igbinosun might be in some trouble when our secondary isn't fully healthy. He's a liability on defense. If Illinois can read the room of trying to pick on him, like when you play these better teams, like these Oregons, these Indianas, whoever it is that stands in your way of the ultimate goal, which is a national championship, somebody eventually is going to be able to capitalize on that, because that's what other good and great teams do. We're not the only very good and great team in the country. So when you play teams that you are superior to and you notice that they find tendencies and they find flaws within your defense, and like specifically trying to pick on throwing towards number one, like you might have to figure that out. And so being able to see Devin Sanchez and see what he can look like as a outside corner, as a true freshman, I think was a solid look against Illinois, because Matt Patricia might have to look, at some personnel changes. I'd really just, Igbinosun has really been disappointing to me.
So my counter to that would be you're correct about everything you said. What I do like about Igbinosun, though, is that he's physical. He's got decent size. He's tough. He's a fighter. So as the season goes on, this is just what I'm saying could be best case scenario. We all know what happens. By the time you get to like the meaningful games, the man-to-man coverage starts fading away. The blitzes start fading away. Everybody's running shell because we're playing against good quarterbacks now. Everybody's scared of everything that's going to happen. And then now when you've got, let's say Indiana, and you've got Igbinosun against, some, their physical receivers. Now you got a guy that if he's playing face up, as a zone corner or something like that, he's got the size to fight these guys. And this happened in the playoffs last year. Like this is what's cool about this. You're right about everything you said, but we also saw Igbinosun be a really good player in a national championship and not really get exposed in the playoffs. In 4 games in the playoffs, he didn't have to get help. He didn't have to get bailed out, because of that. So I do think that Illinois specifically was like, our game plan is to get pass interference, and it worked. It really did work. But it depends on how they're going to call it. And so then I would say the other side of that is, hopefully, if you're in a game to where they call it square. So if you're going to call it on Igbinosun, then you have to call it. You've got the opposite player on the field. You've got Jeremiah Smith. So now, like, I would hope that a ref, just like in the playoffs, would be like, hey, if I'm going to call this, then I got to call these guys holding Jeremiah Smith every play. And then now the physicality, if Igbinosun is not, there's a ton of talent there, but yes, he is grabby. I don't know how he's coached. I don't know if Patricia's saying, hey, worst case, grab him. Like worst case, 15 yards. We cannot let these guys catch a ball. And it worked. It worked again yesterday. I think Sanchez is probably going to be the answer. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. I think Igbinosun is probably a safety in the NFL. The guy's got a ton of talent and skills, but yes, he definitely gets picked on. They're definitely going to go at him. And Indiana is worst case scenario for Igbinosun. I 100% agree. If we're going to play turn and run, if we're going to play, trail technique, that's not his thing. And I don't know if that's a Patricia thing or if that's a, man, you're just not good enough thing. I don't know. We went through this with Sean Wade a few years ago when he went to boundary, or I can't remember if he was boundary. I think he's boundary corner. Anyway, when he went to the outside, it really exposed him as far as like, he was not a trail corner. He was not, he was not a man-to-man guy, and it really jumped off the page. I don't know if that's what's happening here. I think you could be right. But what I would say is I don't want to not have a guy like that on the team, because what I don't want is a small corner. At least I want a guy that would literally fist fight you. I think we're going to need that down the road. I hope it doesn't burn us before that. And it feels like that's what you're worried about. And that's a legitimate concern. Overall, I'm not going to get too deep into the game. I thought it was pretty good. I think there's a glaring problem that the running game can't gouge people. explosive runs just still aren't showing up, and it's starting to concern me. We're not getting guys freed up, past the second line, of defense through the linebackers and all that. Maybe Illinois is really good at linebacker, and they take that away. That being said, Smith and Tate are awesome. Julian saying another game to where he had a real defense in front of him and didn't choke it away. So there's a lot of good takeaways from the game. They're getting better. I think Ryan Day is slow playing this. I hope it's not too much. I'm very concerned that he's slow playing this too much. And we talked about it last week. When it's time to turn it on, can you? He seems aware of it, but I'd like to see a couple 2-minute offenses for me to know that they can go hurry up and it's not too much for Sane and all these things. So there's a lot of unanswered questions. But that being said, after what we just said about what's happened with Penn State, watching the whole Saturday of football, you beat a good team on the road by 18 points. So I mean, there's overall good win.
Yeah, 100%. I do think it was a good win. I think this Ohio State team is still the best team in the country. I think the AP poll reflecting that, keeping Ohio
I actually
State
do now. I actually believe that now. After what happened to Oregon, I believe it now.
Yeah, and I know, I understand that everyone wants to look at resume and things like that, but sometimes, like I said, when Ohio State once they beat Texas and got put in that number one spot, for anybody else to move them out of there, you are going to have a strong case to swindle people on why Ohio State shouldn't be number one. A lot of times, especially when you're not the number 2 or number 3 team that's coming to take that number one spot off of a huge win. Like, nobody has had a big enough win yet where you're like, the number 2 team hasn't came and blew out the number 3 team and was like, they should jump to number 1 now. Like, the team that won the game and should jump to number 1 was back when Ohio State was number 3, beat number 1 Texas, jumped number 2 Penn State to be number 1, and you haven't looked back since. Ohio State hasn't given you any reason. Just like, watching through this Saturday, like, well, look at this Oregon team, and Oregon was in the question after beating Penn State. Like, Oregon goes and loses to Indiana. This Indiana team is for real. You said this Indiana team was for real last week going into this game. You had a feeling that, like, this could be the game where Indiana puts their mark on they're a for real team, and they're not just going to be that 10-2. Like, it almost looked like from last year, like, this Indiana team could take place of Penn State and be that 10-2 team that pretty much you shoe in an Ohio State loss and like a Michigan loss or an Oregon loss or whatever it may be, but they could beat everybody else because they're better than everybody else. It looked like Indiana was even coming into this game, like Indiana could be the new Penn State, but then they beat Oregon, and off the rip, like, Tom Signetti this year has 2 ranked wins on the road. James Franklin got 2 ranked wins in his entire career. Like, in his entire career at Penn State. Tom Signetti did that in this season. Like, he's got 2 quality wins this season. So you're looking at the fact, like, Indiana could be the replacement of Penn State, but now you're looking at the fact 2 weeks ago when Oregon beat Penn State, people were making a case that Oregon could be the best team in the country.
Yes.
Indiana beat this team soundly. Outside of that pick 6, they really beat this team very convincingly. And like, the way the second half went, they really would have beat this team very convincingly outside of Mendoza's pick 6. And hey, that was a great play, a great read by the defensive back, and he took it to the house. That happens. That's what defense is supposed to do. That's what players on defense are supposed to do. You're supposed to make plays. Had an opportunity to make a play and made a play. You take away that one play, though, and you just look at everything. Like, it took defense to take a pick 6 to the house to keep this remotely close. And Indiana still pulls off and wins by 10. You take that away, you're probably talking about Indiana winning anywhere 14-17, and you just look at the way Indiana won differently. Because that impressive game, Indiana was up and looked fairly like Oregon was playing cat and mouse for pretty much the entire game. Indiana was trailing, then they threw that pick 6, and like that looked like the drive where Indiana had an opportunity to deflate Oregon, and instead they threw a pick 6, and it turned Oregon back up, and then Indiana just said, we're not going to panic. We're going to continue to play our football. Yeah. And it worked out for them, and they win by 10 points. So that's why I say, like, that one play is really what made the difference of Oregon being viable late in the game, as opposed to, putting the quiet in the crowd right away. If they would have went out and scored that drive, even if they would have kicked the field goal, just them being up by 10, I think they would have deflated Oregon. They would have deflated that crowd because Indiana looked like the better team for 4 quarters.
especially at the line of scrimmage. That's how I always judge this. Is like I don't care about upsets, or not that this was an upset. I don't really care as much about, like, the wins are awesome. Like when Florida beat Texas, awesome. Like all these, like, surprise wins, and Indiana beating Oregon was a bit of a surprise too. Just in general, that is fair to say that, like, going to Oregon and winning the game. I mean, Ohio State couldn't do it last year, as clearly the better team, which they proved in the playoffs, but they couldn't go to Oregon and win. Indiana went to Oregon and win. They didn't just win, though. Like, they controlled the line of scrimmage. I think they had 6 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, I believe, something like that. Moore had nowhere to go with the ball. Again, the pick 6 is the only reason that it was even a game. I mean, it was really a butt whipping. And so that was what impressive about it. And then it's fair. Like, I don't want to do this. I think Oregon's a really good team. And I was ready to say that they were the best team in the country a few weeks ago. That being said, what have we done with Oregon, in the last 12 months? We've gauged them against teams that we said were good. So, like, we gauged them against a Penn State team this year to we're like, man, good victory, going to Happy Valley and winning that. Yeah, just like Northwestern did. So now we're like, oh, I mean, sometimes that's got to be relevant. It was only 2 weeks ago we were saying Oregon was awesome because they went to Penn State. And now we're like, well, so did Northwestern. So, like, then Indiana, handles Oregon. So what we know from Oregon is the last few big games they've had, it was getting thumped by Ohio State, going to overtime with a Penn State team who hasn't won a Big Ten game yet, and then getting beat by Indiana. So I think that there's no, I don't agree with it, but there's no problem with giving Oregon all the criticism in the world this week. Because if this is Ohio State, we're like, they can't win the big one. They can't do this. Or if it's Penn State, can't do this. You can't do that. I think Oregon's going to be there in the end. I think the winner of this game is going to the playoffs. So Indiana, I considered in the playoffs, like, no question about it. And whatever, Oregon is probably still going to be there, but now they have something to prove, because this is another thing that we just talked about, how Franklin got fired. We're like, well, once you really sit down and say, okay, what's Oregon done? They haven't won a playoff game. You know what I mean? They haven't, they lost to Indiana at home, all these things. So, like, are you going to be like, well, they beat Penn State on the road.
They won a Big Ten championship. I mean, he did win a Big Ten.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. But again, it was a Penn State team. That's what I'm saying now. Yeah. Is like everything Oregon has done is based on how good Penn State was. Beating Ohio State was awesome last year, but then they got trounced by them, so they erased that. That's what I'm saying. It's fair to criticize Oregon right now, though. It's a fair take to criticize Oregon, being like, we don't know how good you actually are. Just like we did with Texas. I'm like, we just got to be fair. We don't know. We did, we said the same thing about Texas, until they beat Oklahoma, they hadn't beat, a Power 4 team. Now they're kind of like worked their way back up. I mean, I'm just saying it's fair if we're going to crush Penn State for what they've done. If we're going to crush these other teams, if we're going to crush Florida State, Oregon should take some strays until they prove that they're a better team.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Now, before we talk about like what I'm about to say will lead into like talking about all the rest of these games and these matchups. But I think, Jeff, everybody, as far as anybody in college football media, anybody doing college football podcasts, anybody conversing college football and enjoy for the passion of it, I think we have to step back and we have to change how we talk about college football a little bit, because here's what's out the window to me now: the transitive property, Jeff. The week-to-week transitive property, because of NIL, because of the balance of college football, we have to stop having the conversations of, you're not a good team because of this team and this and that. But then, because it might wrap back around, like, yes, Texas beating Oklahoma is now like, well, Ohio State now technically again has a quality win. But for the past 4 weeks, you told me they didn't have a quality win because Texas hadn't beat nobody. They hadn't beat a Power 4 team. Now the somebody that they beat is the number 5 team in the country in a neutral site in Dallas for the Red River rivalry. But like, when you start applying the transitive property, we go into the Florida State just lost to Pitt. So now, like, Alabama losing to Florida State got to be like, that one loss we have to question Alabama about being a good team every week, because sure, you beat some good teams, but you showed us you were prone to lose to what is now considered a bad team, another team that's sitting here at 3-3. So the transitive property of trying to weigh in each week how
Yep.
good a team is based on your opponent, because your opponent could be very good, and that loss is what makes them fall off the face of the earth,
Yes.
which is what I think Oregon beating Penn State on the road did. Like, it was a realization of what's to come, and it came a lot sooner for Penn State than you thought. But it was the Oregon game that did that. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean that Oregon didn't beat a really good Penn State team, because going into that
Agreed.
game, Penn State was favored. But now we do the transitive property. So we take, because now that Oregon has lost to Indiana and Penn State fell off the face of the earth, now we got to question how good this Oregon team is, which is a fair question. But also, it could just be they were the start of the downfall for Penn State, while also they are a damn good team. And this Indiana team might sneakily be the best team in the country.
Yes.
Not saying they're better than Ohio State, but like that part of the conversation, like that now has to be the conversation, as opposed to, because we're going to start doing this and we start looking at who lost to who and this, that, and other.
Yeah.
Like, based on transitive property, like Missouri has beaten nobody. So now that they lost by 3 to Alabama, they shouldn't be that good of a team. But they've done it. If you look in the AP poll, Missouri is 5-1, just lost to Alabama, still ranked, no quality wins. Washington is 5-1. People were telling you they have one of the best offenses in the country. They're unranked. Like, but then there's
USC. Well, they're ranked now, but they were unranked going into the game, and they beat a Texas team or a Michigan team that was pretty good. But again, I wanted to say I don't agree with any of it, but I'm saying we have to have the conversation because that's what we do in college football. I totally agree with you.
I just think the way we've done it, though, is like, now we used to do it because
this is how they used to decide national champions. You realize that's why I try to tell people how stupid this was.
These teams weren't as close. Like, there weren't
exactly
18 damn good teams. Now there's 18 damn good teams, Jeff. Now, if you think Miami and Ohio State and maybe like Indiana is superior to everybody else, and if you're like, I think one of those three win the national championship or something, but like the dog fight in between that, Jeff, we've never seen, I don't want to say never, we haven't seen college football this even within conferences and around the country in a long time.
Bro, Indiana's one of the best teams Indiana's one of the best teams in the country. That is unheard of, and it's real. It's not fake. It's real that happened. This isn't UCF from a few years ago. This isn't Cincinnati when they forced them into the playoffs because they thought they had to. This is legit, can beat anybody in the country team, and it's Indiana, a laughing stock of the Big Ten, a game that we used to get. Like, I used to go to that game for $10 a ticket because it was such a a blowout, nothing mattered game. Like that's what we're talking about with how college football is evened out, because a coach was able to move and just bring all the players with him. Now, if we want to have a bigger Indiana conversation, is that sustainable? What we don't know about Cignetti is, can he recruit? My assumption is no. The answer is probably no. But it doesn't matter for this year. He's got a bunch of grown men that know how to play football and are hungry. And it's awesome. But you're totally right. The transitive property.
Transfer portal, if you could dip into the transfer portal and you live off of veteran guys that are dogs, and
we'll see. He might be able to do that.
You have a way, because it's just like with Texas Tech. Like, Texas Tech spending money within the program, going all in on NIL dollars and getting in that transfer portal. Like, Texas Tech is a big team, heavy head on a hunt in the Big 12.
And I just don't know. I don't know if Indiana has that money. That's what I'm saying. I don't know their funds and how much they care about football. I don't know. You might be right. There might be, an Indiana booster, Calbert Chaney might be like, hey, I'm buying y'all a quarterback. I don't know the answer to that. That may be possible. And if it is, this is the new world of college football. The only thing I would say about the transitive property, though, is at some point you have to use it. Like, you have to be able to watch like what a team did against another team and then decide, like, because I think here's a great lesson in that. The opening game of the season in Dublin, Iowa State, Kansas State, we all watched it and we're like, man, what a good game. Two good teams. They both suck. And so I'm just being serious. So like, what we found out is like, no, that was a good game, but nothing matters. There were two bad teams. So we gave them credit for being good. And then now when you look at it, you're like, I really don't care what either team does or somebody does against them. They're just they're not that good. So, and that's part of the fun of college football, because if we get away from that, now we're just into records, and that I don't want to go back to the loss column being the only thing that matters. Now, what I do say is the AP thing is stupid. Like, I know they're just waiting for the playoff, rankings to come out or whatever. Not having USC ranked is ridiculous. Through the weeks, and all these things. But you touched on it. Again, we get to sit here another week, Mo, and talk about season is great. The competition is great. The schedule is great, all because of the changes that were made in college football in the last few years. And it's freaking awesome.
Yeah, and this is what the argument for me was with the 12-team playoff being expanded, how it makes college football better. And like everything I was saying for why I was all for the 12-team playoff is coming into fruition. I mean, we only have like 6 or 7 undefeated teams, and like 2 of them are big name brand. Like you talk about Ohio State, Miami, then you talk about like Texas A&M, Memphis,
Right.
Navy, like Indiana, teams that you're not typically accustomed to coming in this far into the season, midway into the season point, and they're undefeated. And then you're usually thinking like the Alabamas be on the list, the Georgias be on the list. Like in Georgia, for instance, like if we use the transitive property, like because Georgia's struggling with Auburn, I don't know if like when I watched Auburn play yesterday and I watched that Georgia Auburn game, I didn't think that Georgia was playing a bad team. I think Auburn, I think they were playing a good Auburn team, but they're one of those teams. They're a good team, but they're probably not going to beat a team that they're better than. They're going to have an opportunity to beat them. Like they had an opportunity to beat Oklahoma. Like they had multiple opportunities for Georgia. And if everything doesn't go right, they're not going to win that game, but they're going to have you on the edge of your seat till the very end. And that's what they did against Georgia. And like I said, they had every opportunity to win that game. Everything had to go right for them. Even when reaching over the goal line and Georgia's defenders were smart and punched it out, whether you think he crossed or not, like it was good defense, good way to punch it out, good way to take a chance, a good way to leave it up for human error in a sense. It wasn't clear whether he got over before it was loose. And so that was a great defensive play. And then Auburn had another opportunity. Wide receiver strikes wide open down the middle. Jackson Arnold slightly overthrows him just out of the reach of his hands. And it was one of those, dang, that could have been the one that put the dagger in Georgia as far as like, we're here to play and we're probably going to beat you. And this will be the momentum kicker in the home stadium. And instead, like Georgia was able to capitalize off of that. Auburn didn't put any points on the board. And so like, yeah, they're 3-3, but like I don't look at Auburn the way I look at Penn State in a sense. Like, and I guess maybe it's because of expectations. Like I don't look
Auburn would beat Penn State by 3 touchdowns.
Right. And that's why I say, like, I don't look at Auburn's record and I don't think they're a Penn State. I think they're heading in 2 different directions. I think they're at 2 different points in the season. I just think Auburn is one of those, they're not one of those pretty good or damn good teams. They're a good team. And if you don't play them the right way, they're going to mess around and beat you if everything goes right for them. But other than that, they're just a team that's going to keep you playing on the brink like they did Georgia. And Kirby Smart, listen, I really, this is another takeaway that I got from yesterday. Call me crazy, Jeff. I really think we're on a crash course for a Ryan Day versus Kirby Smart national championship.
Oh, no.
Like the king of the crown of the NIL era. I really do. There's been like watching Georgia. It's not about how good you think Georgia is. It's not about whether you think they're one of the 2 best teams in the country. It's not about whether you think they're better than Ohio State. It's just this fire in Kirby Smart right now. Like, yeah, he lost to Alabama. I understand that. You're going to lose a game. We may not even be in a world where we see any undefeated SEC or Big Ten conference champions. That might not be a normal thing anymore. Like you might be 2 losses and winning your conference in today's era of college football. But this fire in Kirby Smart, after these wins, the way he reacts with the crowd, he was going at it with the Auburn crowd and all in good fun. It wasn't in a negative way. He wasn't doing nothing crazy, but it's like something's lit up in Kirby Smart. And part of me thinks that Kirby Smart sees what's going on over there at Ohio State, see what Ryan Day doing, won the national championship, looks very likely to win a back-to-back national championship. People are saying Ryan Day is entering the Kirby Smart talks, the conversations, that type of coach. Is he going on this Kirby Smart type of run? And I think Kirby Smart sees that. I think we're on a crash course of the way Kirby Smart is firing himself up for this season, the mission that Ryan Day is constantly on, whether you agree with how he's going about it or not, you see what the goal is at the end of the day. I think we're on a crash course for a Georgia-Ohio State national championship. Call me
Yeah.
crazy.
No, I don't. I think those are the two most modern programs. I'm not sitting here telling anybody they're the two, best programs or whatever, but they're two most modern. I think what Kirby feels slipping away is he doesn't have that built-in advantage. I don't think anymore, and I can't believe I'm saying it. I don't think anymore that necessarily Georgia just automatically looks more physically gifted than Indiana or Ohio State or Alabama. Like, again, it just goes to the transfer portal, it goes to NIL, it goes to all these things. But now I think that you don't like Arvell Reese doesn't play for Georgia. That's the difference in these two teams, and that's what we've been saying for years. It is crazy. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure how good Georgia is. I know they're. Here's the thing I'll say about Georgia. I'll put them on my list. I'm going to do a rankings later in the week, but I'll put them on my list as they can beat anybody in the country, but I don't know where they're ranked, as far as that goes in the country. But like you said, it was a crazy weekend. I just want to throw out there, like, Ole Miss, number 5, wins by 3 over a Washington State team that, like, I think me and you and, like, 10 of our best friends could beat. So, like, you don't know what to do with these close games, but that's why you can't use the transitive. USC going to Notre Dame next week is one of the biggest games of the year. It's definitely Notre Dame's biggest game of the year, because if they lose, they're pretty much done without a playoff and all these things. So yes, I think Georgia's very good. I thought they looked good the other day. They don't have the players that they typically have. They, of course, they have good players, but they don't have an NFL team on defense anymore like they had a few years ago. But they're still well coached. They still fight for the ball. They can still make big plays. They're still struggle on the outside. I don't know why Georgia hasn't been able to, put a wide receiver core together like, Ohio State or a lot of these other teams have. They're still good. I just want to throw out there real quick, big win by Texas. They did everything they were asked to do. I don't think that Oklahoma, should have brought him back and played him. Nothing against him. The quarter, he wasn't ready. Texas, though, big win by Texas. Manning's getting better every week. They're still in the hunt. And Texas has done, I said it earlier in the show, exactly what Penn State couldn't do. They rallied. They freaking sucked it up. You know what I mean? They didn't let their season go down the toilet. And now Texas has put themselves in a position to where they control their own destiny now. So shout out to Texas for, a big win Saturday in the Red River.
Yeah, I mean, Texas had a huge win. USC beating Michigan the way they beat Michigan. Now,
that good win.
Like, and that was
I think Michigan's good.
So do I. I think here's my thing, though.
I think they're a good team with a freshman quarterback.
I think it's very evident, though, that the one thing that Michigan needs to attack in the offseason is they need to hit the transfer portal, and they need some wide receivers. They need some wide receivers that could create some separation, because a lot of teams have been able to do that against USC up to this point, except for Michigan. And, like, you have a star-studded freshman quarterback, and I understand maybe the moment was too big for him on the road, on the West Coast, travel. I get all of that. Bryce Underwood didn't look the greatest, but, like, it's also like you expect him to throw guys open that can't get open. Remember, we had this conversation, Jeff, about, like, the ease of Julian Sand being at quarterback. You're throwing 2 open guys as opposed to you haven't seen him have to throw guys open very often.
As far as first year starters, Julian Sand's got a pretty good gig.
But we talked about, like, the difference in what we haven't seen from Sand is, can he throw guys open, because he's not in a position where he has to, because his guys can get open. Where Bryce Underwood is constantly having to throw guys open that can't
Small
get
windows.
open. Yeah. And so for a secondary of USC to have constantly been exposed up to this point to really lock down and look good against this Michigan team, to me, was very glaring. Then as soon as Justice Haynes went down, I think I don't want to say he broke his ribs, but bruised ribs, whatever it was, that he went down and came out of the game. Like, the offense looked inept after that. They looked like they tried to put it in Bryce Underwood's hands. They couldn't get the run game going. USC was physically were able to match Michigan, which is something that USC typically hasn't been able to do. The last time they matched up against Michigan, Michigan out-physicaled them and willed their way to win. I think USC last year was a more talented team than that Michigan team that they played. But I think Michigan, just being more physical, they were able to will their way to win, pouncing on the opportunity for USC to make a mistake. This time, that wasn't the situation. They were up. USC basically ran away with the game. There was, by the middle of the third quarter, you knew that USC was going to beat Michigan. I don't think you had any doubts unless USC had folded this game away. The focus was on whether LR was, Lincoln Riley was going to be able to keep the lead, maintain the lead, put his foot on their necks, whatever it may be. But that was the focus. Nobody really thought, even if Michigan was able to rally, they were going to be waiting to criticize Lincoln Riley, not say what a great job Michigan did to rally the game. It was just going to be on all the mistakes and pointing out the mistakes that Lincoln Riley, the head coaching staff, and whatever mistakes that the USC players would have made in order for that to happen. But it didn't happen. And now USC is a ranked team. They're viable in the Big Ten. They have, they got one loss. They lost to a good Illinois team. Understand it, but that's one of those. This is a week in and week out sport now. This is no longer like you might lose to a team that typically you might look better than the very next week, but all of these teams are pretty good. And so A- performance from one team and a B+ performance from another team on any given Saturday is the difference between these pretty good teams going at each other and winning and losing these games.
Just for the record, here's how close it is before we get out of here. UCLA wins out. They go to the Big Ten championship game. That's where we're at. They're 8th in the Big Ten. If they win out, that means they would beat Ohio State and USC, and they would go to the Big Ten championship game. Like, that's the separation between what we think is 3 weeks ago, we thought UCLA was not going to win a game this season. Now they control their own destiny. Penn State, who we penciled in as a national championship contender, is deleted from the conversation. Like, that is how this college football season has been. It's amazing. Michigan's not dead yet in the Big Ten. Nebraska, shout out to Nebraska, quietly having a great season.
Quietly still winning, like because they
5-1 is awesome.
But because they lost, that Michigan game. Remember, we talked about it going into the game. That Michigan game was the one circle. Whether we were going to take them as real Big Ten championship, appearance contenders or whatever. And so they're probably going to continue to just win after that and find themselves in the conversation of they could find their way in a tiebreaker being in the Big Ten championship, but they're not going to get a lot of respect because they lost that Michigan game. And now that Michigan lost to USC, like there's going to have to be a big win on their schedule. And I don't know.
Let me just put this out there though. Like, here's the thing though. We got to remember, if you win your conference, which would be a big win, I understand that. But if you win your conference, you get an automatic bid. Nebraska left. I mean, after they have Minnesota, Northwestern, they have USC, which is going to be a giant game for both of those in the Big Ten. And then they have UCLA, Penn State, Iowa. Nebraska is completely alive to go to the Big Ten championship. And if you go to the Big Ten championship, the game this year, I want to put this out there way ahead of time so I can tell everybody I told you so 2 months from now. The other team in the Big Ten championship game, whether it's Oregon, Ohio State, whoever gets there, after what happened to Oregon last year and it didn't matter, may not care. So if you're the underdog in the Big Ten championship game, let's say it's an undefeated Ohio State, because that's what I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that's how it's. Ohio State may not care if they win that game. Like, this is a real thing. And so, like, if you're in Nebraska and you can just get to that, if you can just get to that game, you've got a chance to go to the college football playoffs.
Yeah, which is absolutely crazy. Like, so USC also,
and USC the same thing with USC. By
USC's in the same boat. Nebraska's in a boat. Nebraska's in a boat where they could win out. Like, let's say they beat USC, they're sitting there with one loss, and they could not be in the Big Ten championship, and they could still be in the conversation of being a Big Ten.
Yes. Nebraska has one loss at the end of the season.
They could be 11-1 and not in because Indiana and Ohio State both finished undefeated.
But Nebraska hopes that happens. They want to be the Indiana of last year. Nebraska can be the Indiana of last year, get into the playoffs and not have to play anybody or not have to beat anybody.
Yeah, and that could be the situation that Nebraska's in just as much as USC. But see, USC will have wins over Notre Dame and then obviously over that Nebraska team if they go that route. So they will have some quality wins under their belt while sitting there at 11-1 and not playing in the Big Ten championship because it's Indiana and because it's Ohio State and getting their way into the playoffs, which is something I think Lincoln Riley is shooting towards too. And also being
USC is in great shape. USC is in great shape. They could
lose another game and still be a playoff team. Like, there's still a world where they could be 10-2 and having an argument for a playoff spot. I think this Notre Dame game coming up this Saturday is very, very important for this USC team. I think especially to have that quality win because the college football playoff committee is going to respect you beating Notre Dame when they're sitting in that room. They're going to bring it up that you beat them. It's going to be a respectable win, no matter what happens to Notre Dame after that. Being that third ranked team that beats them, being the other good team, that just means Notre Dame can't beat none of the good teams, but all the good teams beat them, and it'll count as a quality win later on in the season. When
I'll tell you right now, if USC wins this weekend, they're going to the playoffs.
I would imagine.
They're going to beat UCLA. They don't have any. They're not playing Ohio State. They got Oregon. Who cares? They lose to Oregon. Whatever. If USC beats Notre Dame this weekend, because of what you said, Notre Dame can lose the rest of their games. Whoever beat them is going to get all the credit in the world. Notre Dame is stamped as a good team this year. So if USC beats them this weekend, unless they screw up, they're in the playoffs. This is
if they win this weekend, they'll control their own destiny. They'll probably be favored in a lot of their games that's left on their schedule if they beat Notre Dame. So that's something that I can't wait.
And by the way, they're ranked 20th right now.
Yeah, and we'll see.
They're 5-1 and just beat Michigan, who won the national championship 2 years ago, and they're 20th. Meanwhile, Vanderbilt's 17th.
And they're holding one of the biggest matchups coming in. They play Notre Dame. You got Ole Miss and Georgia. I think that'll be very telling on this SEC race coming in this Saturday. But Jeff, I do appreciate everybody for tuning in. I appreciate it for listening. Jeff, I appreciate you for joining the show. It's been a weekly thing, especially. I know it's not hard to get you to talk college football as long as you got some time on your schedule. So, I appreciate everybody for tuning in. I appreciate everybody for listening. Jeff, do you have anything to say before we close out?
No, that's it. Just keep up to date. Jeff Needs Sports. I missed a week last week, but I'm hoping this week. I got a couple cool shows coming up with some other things. Locked On Buckeyes. I got Stuart Brooking coming up. I want to get Mo on the show hopefully later in the week to kind of look at my realistic playoff rankings is what I call them, and then kind of preview the weekend coming up, because now we're into the do or die portion of the college football season. The next half of the college football season is really, really, really important. There's no more mistakes can be made in conference play. So it's a great time of year. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, like I said, I appreciate everybody for tuning in. I appreciate everybody for listening. We will catch you later in the week to talk about the upcoming college football week. So be well, be safe, and catch you on the next episode of the Coach Mo Murphy Show. Peace.